Kita mo nga naman yan. Salamat, Martha. It's that day of the week again when we explore and appreciate green ideas and inventions. This is Going Green. Did you know that the average person creates 4 tons of carbon dioxide each year? Now, once the CO2s are in the environment, they stay there for the next 50 to 200 years. In fact, the current global warming we are experiencing today is due to the greenhouse gases accumulated in the last 100 years. These days, the Green Archers are literally going green as they implement the Project Carbon Neutral. Find out why eating more chicken than beef can help the environment, actually just eating more vegetables in general, and why you should keep your air temperatures not lower than 25 degrees. Ben Eusebio of the Lasallian Institute for the Environment or LIFE now joins us in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Ben.
Good morning.
This is a great topic, and I'm very interested to talk about it. Carbon footprint really is something that we should be very, very aware and conscious of. Maybe we should start with the definition of terms. Carbon footprint, what exactly do we mean by that?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to explain these things. Carbon footprinting to us is a first step in this program we call Project Carbon Neutral. What we're trying to do is benchmark for the 17 schools of De La Salle, Philippines. We have 17 schools in the network. Just because of our activities, we generate what you referred to as carbon dioxide. We call it carbon dioxide equivalents because this can be different compounds, but we have to report it on a common unit. So I will be referring to carbon dioxide equivalents, and I don't want to be technical, but just so we can say from this source, this is the equivalent carbon dioxide. Then we're talking about the same thing in a singular unit perspective. So our carbon footprinting then starts with taking a look at from the school's activities, from each of the individual 17 schools, how much carbon dioxide do we emit in a year?
Right.
And sometimes we report that on a monthly basis by averaging the thing. Okay, so how do we do that? Then we start by saying, what are the categories of sources? And we've broken that into categories, actually 5 categories. The first one is composed of lighting, motors, and then our appliances, which includes air conditioners, fans, things like that. And then plus what we call raw fuels. Because in our activities in the schools, we have concessionaires. So when they burn, natural gas from these things that they use to prepare their food, they contribute to what this particular school generates as a carbon dioxide equivalent emission. And then we have the category 2, which is transportation. Because the school exists, then we have private cars, we have school buses, and there were people who commute, things like that. Those are all sources, mga motor. Okay. And then we have the third category that we would call livestock, is one of the categories. Believe it or not, chickens, pigs, and cows and goats, they contribute to CO2, to that problem. And then a fourth category is solid waste. How we dispose of our solid waste contributes in a way to the what we call the gaseous things that create global warming.
Right. We've got some interesting graphics on screen now where we're showing how these things sort of fit into the pie.
Yes,
I mean, a big chunk of where your carbon footprint actually comes from is, well, in basic terms, everything we do, whether it's driving your car to get from A to B, heating a cup of water so that you can have your cup of coffee, charging your cell phone, plugging into an outlet, all of these things have leave a trace, leave a carbon footprint, so to speak.
Well, they do, and basically it's because, for example, when you use, our refrigerators as an appliance, where does the electricity come from? It comes from a source, whether it's oil-fired, whether it's coal-fired, whatever the source of that fuel, that generates carbon dioxide. So when we talk about sources, it really all goes back to the source of the energy. So the intent is to figure out first, how much do we generate and how can we minimize the usage?
Just to open people's eyes, what about some interesting little bits of trivia on carbon footprint and, well, when we say eating chicken is better than eating beef and probably eating vegetables in general rather than meat, in terms of a carbon footprint, you're able to get the same sort of nutritional values out of, say, a serving of vegetables versus a serving of beef. But what you don't see is there's a lot of food that needs to go to the beef to get the beef to a certain size and weight so that it can be served to you.
Yes.
While the beef is growing, it's actually flatulent and it's producing carbon dioxide. And all of these things contribute to a large carbon footprint when you can actually be having the same sort of nutritional values from a source which is a little more with a smaller carbon footprint.
Yes, in fact, I don't profess to be an expert in this food conversation, but I think everybody agrees, those that work in the food industry or even the health people, that actually eating vegetables is the best way.
Right.
Because when you start talking about chicken, pork, and what they do is they eat the plants and then they convert that into the energy that they store, so that at some point when they get killed and we eat those, that's the energy that helps us, grow. So that inefficiency is a big issue. Now, you mentioned chicken and beef. One of the things that they focus on there is the fact that it takes a long time to bring a cow to the point where it can be killed and it's really ripe and good to eat. So if you compare that to chicken, who's got, to put it bluntly, a short life, the emissions that come from a pound of protein you get from here in chicken, it's a no-brainer. It really is, and that's the comparison.
They're very much more efficient ways to be living our lives.
And a cow is less efficient than
a chicken.
Yes,
knowing what we do know now about how efficiencies can work and how we can change certain lifestyle habits and operational things, particularly with a school like LaSalle and the various campuses that you guys have, what exactly are you guys doing to be a little more carbon neutral?
Okay. Our objective in carbon neutrality is, I started by saying we're benchmarking how much we're emitting. Now, for that to be neutral, we have to talk about the other side of the scale. You did show a scale, and when we say neutral, it'd be just like our scale has to be balanced. Then that's neutral. And our objective is to really go neutral or better.
Right.
Now, because of the nature and the location and the sites of our facilities, our schools, some schools can go neutral, some will never get neutral.
Right.
But some will do much better than neutral.
And offset.
Right. And the right side of that scale we call offsetting or mitigating.
Right.
And what are the portions of that? We see two categories there. One is trees. We in LaSalle also have a program we called 1 Million Trees and Beyond. And little did we know when we started that program 4 years ago that it would contribute significantly to this program now that we call Project Carbon Neutral, because trees sequester. And it's not just the upper portion of the ground that collects CO2. I am told by foresters that even below ground, the roots, and even those that fall on the ground, the dead leaves and all of that. So when you ask the question, what are we doing? First thing we did was took an inventory. So now we have an inventory of all the sources of our carbon dioxide emissions. How can we mitigate that?
Right.
And part of that, as I mentioned, is trees. The others are, and it's not just the technological aspect. We can take, for example, the amount of carbon emitted by air conditioners. So we can say, or I can calculate that if we get rid of half of our air conditioners and go into a more efficient configuration, then we diminish our carbon emissions by so much. Or lighting, by going LED versus, areas where we've got incandescent or fluorescent. We call that technological mitigation because we can calculate that back of the envelope. We can come up with numbers.
Right.
But surprisingly to us, we weren't thinking this way, but as we went through this process, we're ending our first year, we identified that there are also significant measures that are not amenable to simply calculating, and we call those behavioral and administrative.
Okay.
What are some of the administrative? No styro policy. A school edict that says last person out of a room turned off the switch. turn off the switch so that you cut off the light demand for energy. And then behavioral. Some of the things now that we've got is, and it took quite a while to get the students to accept it. We have one school in Luzon that says no parking permits for freshmen and sophomores.
Okay.
So, because we find, for example, one of the things that I was surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, is that the carbon dioxide from our transportation activities are much larger than any of the other sources, including lighting, air conditioning, and all of that.
It's just basically kids going to school.
Yes.
And kids and
Right,
administrative people. We were talking earlier, you are completing the report. You're slowly putting together a picture of exactly how much carbon the schools are emitting.
Yes.
And I know the figures are still a little incomplete at this point. But is there any sort of a ballpark figure, or can you give me any sort of rough estimates in that respect?
Well, I haven't really delved into the individual school reports because all the 17 schools are coming up now with, after the first year, the individual project carbon neutral report. So they will report how much they're emitting and how much they're offsetting.
Okay.
Now, it's a range. Our smallest school, for example, emits about 19,000 tons per year.
Okay.
But I would imagine we have a big one that might report 700,000.
Right.
And then the offsets are also within that kind of a range. So I would rather not give a number at this point simply because I may be off base. I have not added them to even get a sense of what that order of magnitude is.
True. Well, I think the more important thing that's happening here really is a willingness to look at those figures, whatever those figures may be, and to address and see how you can change things in very concrete ways. And based on our conversation, it's not just large institutions like LaSalle or certain large corporations or factories. These are things we can be adopting really on a personal basis. We should be doing this in our homes and in our daily lives, shouldn't we?
So true. And examples of those, for example, these things that we call behavioral mitigation policies for the schools can be applied in families, in homes.
Right.
Like making sure that if we can afford it, maybe one way to go is to change lighting from incandescent to something that's less energy demanding. The problem there is that it really depends on the capacity and the financial capacity and capability, affordability for the families. Because one advantage to having these LEDs is you have less energy demand, but on the front end, it's an economic investment.
Right.
And sometimes it's so easy for anyone to talk about, well, if you invest this much, in about 3 or 4 years, you'll get your money back. But if the person doesn't have the money right now to invest, that doesn't hold water.
Right.
That argument is irrelevant.
True. Well, we're looking forward to the findings, and we certainly salute the efforts of LaSalle in becoming a little more carbon neutral. I think we all have something to learn from the project. So thank you for sharing that with us today, this morning.
Thank you too for giving us the opportunity to share.
All right, thank you so much to Mr. Ben Eusebio, the Executive Director, LaSallian Institute for the Environment, or interestingly called LIFE.
LIFE, yes.
All right, thank you, sir.
We're proud of that acronym.
All right, do you have the next great green idea, or do you have any out-of-this-world plan to save the planet? Let us know and tell us what you're doing to help save the environment. Send in your pictures and thoughts to ancgoinggreen@gmail.com and get a chance to be featured right here, where we are going green.